Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, the podcast where we go beyond the punchlines to explore what comedy really means to the people who live it. I'm your host Mark Decano, and every episode I sit down with a comedian to unpack how humour shaped their lives, heals their pain and connects them to the world, where jokes meet truth and funny gets real. I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 2,000 different comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. Please also take a moment to like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is an Irish comedian who turns absurdity into comedy. From murderous matadors to a toilet in the Peruvian jungle, he weaves the stories of his curious experiences with humour, emotion, warmth, and catchy, clever melodies. It's comedian Eoghan Collins. Do you remember comedy as being a big influence on you early on when you were growing up?
In a way, more kind of performance as a whole. Like, I actually trained as an actor in my early 20s. And from when I was very, very young, I always wanted to be an actor and performer. I was quite introverted, so I'd just be off in my own world, particularly playing with toys, creating stories that way, almost like a god to these action figures. Just as a bit of an escape. But I mean, I reckon comedic actors are probably the biggest influence. Like Jim Carrey was probably the biggest influence since I was very young. I remember, was it 90? See, I was born in 91. Wasn't it 93 or 94 that it was Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, and The Mask all came out in the same year? So there was just, being bombarded by Jim Carrey. So I was heavily influenced by him, probably because, he's the definition of an extroverted performer. He's loud, he's big, he's draws the attention. And I think because I was quite quiet when I was younger, that was something that I saw as appealing. So I was very quiet and to myself. It was more acting, and then comedy just came about as an interest later on in terms of pursuing it. I've always loved it, stand up as a medium, but it was always something where I was in my head going I know I'd never have the balls to be able to go up and do that. That looks insane. And lo and behold, here I am doing it later for the last 3 years. And it is insane, Mark. Yeah. It is. It's absolutely crazy to go up on stage and beg audience members for laughter.
But as an actor, obviously your audience isn't as immediate because, film, the audience isn't there at all. Theatre, they're politely waiting for you to finish. Whereas in comedy, the reaction is instantaneous.
Yeah. I mean, you can do comedic plays, but I'm trying to be fair to theatre audiences here. There's something quite honest about comedy that I like, where empirically whether something went well or not, judging on the response. Theatre audiences tend to want to give you more. I don't know, because theatre audiences are there because they love theatre and they want to be there in the theatre. As an art form, it's kind of veering into the area of a heritage art form now, because it's not necessarily as popular as it was years ago. So they're diehard fans. But, with comedy, you might go into a room, particularly in London, where half the audience is comedians who are not listening to you, and the other half have been dragged by those comedians and they necessarily want to be there. So if you can get those people to laugh, it's extremely gratifying. That was something that kind of started messing with my head a bit, I suppose, so I still do acting a bit, not as much. I focus way more on the comedy, but there is something about the not knowing, It's a very narcissistic trait, I suppose. We are I want to know whether I was a good boy there on stage, and I don't know whether I did it on stage as an actor. But yeah, it is that is probably the biggest difference between comedy and theatre. There's a knowledge of whether or not you did well or not. And for some reason, whatever happened to me as a child that I'm after blocking out, that's very important to me.
But do you think that there was like one catalyst, one moment where you sort of made the switch and thought, I've been doing acting and now I'm going to do comedy? Was there a particular inspiration or a particular moment?
There was, yeah. I don't know if you heard about this at all. It was a couple of years ago. There was a thing called COVID.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with it.
Have you heard of
that?
Yeah. So I got out of theatre school in 2017, and the best part about that school was they instilled in us the necessity to write your own stuff. As an actor, more often than not, you're waiting by the phone, waiting for someone to give you a job, which I personally found extremely stressful. Like, you have no control at all. So this school was like, it's really important to make sure you put on your own stuff, write your own plays, garner a group of people around you that are also interested, like directors and producers and set designers and all this stuff. So I co-wrote a play with a fella who was in my year that we put on down in the now no longer running Limerick Fringe, and it was like an absurdist comedy piece about two men auditioning to be the new Virgin Mary for the impending apocalypse, which was as scatty and messy as that sounds as the brief. But it was fun because it was comedy and we utilized a bit of music. And then the next play I wrote was one of my own, and it was a dark musical comedy about a cult. And it was 5 cast members, 4 live musicians, and we ran it for a week in 2017 in Dublin. It went well enough. Obviously, looking back now, you can look at it and go, geez, I would have done a lot differently there in terms of like production and the writing of it. But this is all a long-winded way to say I took into account everything that goes into writing your own stuff, like in theatre. Say, for example, it was a theatre that we put on that cult musical in, 75-seater. It was for the week. We had a good relationship with the theatre. So if not, the venue rental would have been, I think it's $2,000, maybe a bit more, maybe $3,000. All the performers were doing a pro bono for free. They need to pay like directors, marketing, costume, all this stuff. So like, all in all, you could be looking, you're anywhere between 6 to 10 grand in the hole with a play before you even sold tickets. And as we've already covered, it's kind of hard to get people in the door for theatre, particularly new theatre. It'd be different now if I was doing like Hamlet the musical or something, where people are like, oh, I know that. I might come into that, But that wasn't the case. So then that was like, I enjoyed writing, and everything I wrote was comedic and musical. And I had a buddy when the pandemic started. He and I were just like, why don't we start just writing comedy music as a duo? He and I were like big Flight of the Conchords fans. Like I discovered them when I was 16, and they like blew me away. I loved them. So we actually started as a duo similar to that,
right,
writing songs over COVID. And I'd say it was about a year and a half before we finally got up on stage. So I actually started as a comedy duo with a fella in Dublin.
Right.
And that was the first foray into performing comedy. And I remember distinctly the first time being off stage, he and I together, and it was far more terrifying and exhilarating than anything I'd done in theatre. And it was just 5 minutes of a really bad song about having long foreskin. but it was it was something akin to like, it was quite euphoric coming off stage afterwards. And again, it was just 5-minute open spot in a club up in Dublin. And it was just like, oh, I haven't felt like this energized coming off stage in probably ever. Maybe towards the start of like performing acting would have got the same. But this was like, oh, this is like a drug or something. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Obviously still chasing that dragon now. I've never got back that feeling. But it was enough to hook me.
Yeah. So you've stuck with the musical side of it, though. I mean, when you mentioned the difference between theatre and doing stand-up, do you see yourself as a stand-up who does music, or do you see yourself as a musical comic?
I would have initially seen myself as a musical comedian, and now because of the way I've gone stylistically, I probably count myself more as like a stand-up who also has music. Like I did initially started off doing like the full songs.
Yeah.
So myself and my buddy Niall, who we had the duo with, it was like, anywhere between 3 to 5 minute songs that were about almost like social commentaries or, observational comedy.
Yeah.
And then because Niall's intelligent, he dipped out and decided to try and pay for his mortgage. So I decided to keep going on my own, and naturally the material became a bit more personal, and a bit more in line with some of the comedians that I love, which almost flies in the face. The musical comedy can be quite, situational, social commentary, observational, but this was more kind of like, I started like looking at stuff to do with myself and then putting that up on stage.
Yeah.
And that was hard to do then in full length songs. I remember when I made that switch, it was like suddenly it wasn't working at all anymore.
Yeah.
Like I spent 2 months, nearly every show I was bombing. And I like to the point I was like, was I just imagining that I was getting laughs before for the last year? This is crazy. And then I just naturally started like writing jokes, just regular setup punches, and then splicing that with just like little musical bits. My girlfriend came to see me and she made the observation. She was like, why don't you just put the jokes you've written to melodies? And then that kind of unlocked something where it was like, instead of doing songs, I could just have regular joke structure, 2 little short melodies. I haven't described it this way. I had a buddy who described it to me as my jokes are like musical comedy tapas, which I thought was a nice little tidy way to sum it up. So it's just no longer the songs, but just short little setup punches. And sometimes they'll develop into a routine or, in line with like an Irish comedic tradition. I find myself leaning more towards storytelling, which is I'm trying to figure out how to do that with music. It's quite difficult to figure out how to do story to melody or song. Like it's got its own different structure. Like it's something that I haven't figured it out, but I'd like to. It intrigues me because I haven't seen it before,
Yeah. That's an interesting point, because having a storytelling style, when you're doing an hour, you've got room to sort of flex and go into those stories at length. But that snippets of music and interwoven with talk, that lends itself better to those 5 minute, 7 minute spots, like when I saw you do the musical comedy awards.
Sure.
That lends itself to that because you can sort of turn over and move on quite quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be easier to weave a story and then interspersed with those musical bits than it is to have a short period of time and try and be a storyteller, even if you are condensed in that way.
Oh, definitely. I think usually when you get the longer, like say in a 5, I wouldn't do any story. Even in a 7, it's kind of hard if you have something that's a bit shorter. I think because you saw me perform the other night, and I had that bit about seeing this couple go into a disabled bathroom to do drugs. And that was an actual story that actually happened. Like, but that's a nice like I've been doing that for so long, I figured out how to condense it down to like, I think it's like 2.5 minutes worth of a story. And it's something I could tag onto the end of the set. So, just do your setup punches at the start to establish that, if there's a bit of a lull here in a story part, you can stick with me because I've proven I can make you laugh at least for 2 minutes at the start. But yeah, it's interesting as a form, like storytelling as a form in comedy is like, it's almost akin to like when I was first doing like the songs, 3 to 4 minutes. If I had a new song, that meant I had to go up and just hope the song worked. No more so than like if you have a story where you're like, all these story points, these beats are important to the whole makeup of it, so I have to hope that it's all there. So it's a similar mountain to climb, but just a different outcome, the story or the song. But I find myself being more attracted to the storytelling with the music as opposed to just, again, going down the same line and so some musical comedians that do it fantastically, like Paul Burnham can do verse, chorus, bridge, and then it's amazing and hilarious. Like, I don't have that skill. I've tried to do that. It's very hard. So I'm like, all right, I'll just go. I'll stick to stories there.
Well, I mentioned the Musical Comedy Awards because I saw you in 24 and 25, in which you finalist this year. So how do you feel about the Musical Comedy Awards specifically, but also your role in it and awards in general?
Great. I mean, it's great to see that they have like a competition for musical comedy specifically, because, there's loads of ones for just traditional stand-up. So it's great. And it's great to see the different flavors of musical comedians out there. Like the guys who won, like Shots at the Dragon the year that I won, like, they're fantastic. The two boys, and I actually went down, myself and another fella who was in it, Joe DaCosta, went down and recorded a song with them, shot a video. Was it in May or something? So it was great as a collaborative tool, to kind of make connections with other comedians and work with them and do other stuff. But it's great because, it gave us the opportunity to perform in the Bloomsbury Theatre. There was reviewers there was agents. So, I got a nice couple of quotes. What did Chortle say to me? The best quote was, Eoghan Collins is like Colin Farrell if he'd been born living under a hedge. which I wasn't sure whether it was like a compliment or not, but either way, it's like that's a great little line to have on a poster.
Yeah. And also, you've done the Fringe a couple of times, which is a different form of competition, where you're competing for audiences with thousands of other shows. I mean, what mindset do you have when you're going into that sort of environment, and how's the festival been to you?
Mindset you have to have, I think, and this was something that was relayed to me, set your bar of expectations so low that you can't be disappointed by anything, which, is a funny thing to have been said to me, but it's also extremely true, because both years that I've gone up doing, this year I did the full month, the year beforehand was 2.5 weeks, and it can be quite taxing mentally, but if I'm not expecting anything out of it, then anything that does happen just tends to be a bonus. This year in particular, I knew my slot was at 11 p.m. at night in City Cafe, which is quite central just off the Royal Mile, and would tend to draw people who have been partaking in alcohol, let's just say, at that hour of the night. And I knew I was kind of going to be fielding wilder crowds, but it actually wasn't that bad, all in all. I mean, most of them were quite well behaved. I mean, I did have two guys from, was it the Orkney Islands or Skye or something, two lads who I realised too late could have been extras from Train Spotting, because they were about 20 minutes into the show. It's this tiny little room, and one of them lit up a cigarette in the middle of the performance underneath the fire alarm. And I was I had to stop what I was doing. And I was like, what are you doing? He couldn't hear me. His buddy had to bump him on the shoulder and be like, your man's talking to you. And I was like, what are you doing? You can't be smoking in here. And he goes, oh, sorry. And just crushed it in his hands to put it out. And I was just like, oh my God, you made me want to head out there, boys. And they were very nice about it, and they left. I was just like, you're so on your own in Fringe. I was like, this, they could do anything here now, because I mean, they were bopping along so much, they were definitely on at least ketamine, and they were making the rest of the room extremely uncomfortable. And then on top of that, last year at City Cafe, I remember the fire department were called because some punter had tried to set fire to, I think, the Hollywood room down below. And I was just in my head going, I'm going to be that guy this year who gets the fire department to City Cafe. And then I was even just more freaked out about the guys in the other two venues, and I was going to blow up their shows and kind of mess with their bucket at the end. Luckily, it didn't go off, but yeah, that was probably the wildest experience. But other than that, it was great. And like most comedians will say, it's like boot camp for comedy, right? You go up and it's balls to the wall. You have to like mind your stamina. Like I made a distinctive choice to kind of like not go out, not go party at all, because it being late anyway kind of helped with that. I couldn't, what am I going to do? Like go out? I suppose you can go out at 1 or midnight at the Fringe and stay out for a while, but I was like, I can't do this. I'll ruin the rest of the run, and I'm 34 as well. Like I can't. I'd have 2 pints after some shows, and I wake up in the morning as if I had 12.
Well, like you say, I've seen you in London, I've seen you in Edinburgh. I mean, as you're playing different venues in different parts of the country or further afield, do you find that you adapt your comedy or your comedy is received differently as you move from region to region culturally?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest culture shock about initially coming and gigging in particularly London is audiences don't give you as much as I would have gotten back in Ireland. Like in Ireland, we're kind of like animals. Like we'll just laugh along with anything. We're a bit more raucous, if you get my drift. But then English audiences tend to be, you have to prove yourself a lot more to them, which initially when I came over was like really messing with my head. I was like, God, it's like, dude, but like, how difficult is it to make them laugh? But then as you go along, it actually makes you better, so you have to work even harder. Whereas if you're playing to like, Irish people or even like Scottish people would be similar. It's a lot more, I don't want to say easy, but you can get into a role a lot easier. Or you don't have to work as hard. So I think here, as I said, in London, it's like the work ethic naturally has to jump up a few notches. Like even because I know I said like audiences that are there dragged by other comedians who might not necessarily want to be there, but even audience members who are there to see comedy will require more of you. Because I think just naturally being in a city like London is so large, there's so much on. Audiences are show savvy. Even like comedy as an art, like stand up as an art form is kind of becoming more popular. So audiences are becoming a bit more learned about comedy and structure and what works and what doesn't. Certain types of material won't work here as well in other places. And there's one thing I'm trying to be very conscious of, because I think this happens to a lot of Irish comedians. When they come over here, a lot of their material will be, cultural differences about being Irish compared to English, which can be quite hack. I think it's okay to have some of that. I do have some of that material that I usually put up top of my set. Because I still kind of feel, and this will probably wash away over time, but I still feel like I need to acknowledge I'm Irish in London. That's not unique, but it feels like a good door in. But yeah, like because then there's like material like that wouldn't work as well back in Ireland that would work here. Jabs at the English from an Irish perspective. That's all we do back home. We've heard it all. But it does kind of work here, and it's a good technique for putting yourself, because I think a lot of my jokes I tend to write are from a high status point of view, which I don't think always really works for me. I think people respond more when I put myself at a low status. But in the context of Irish English, I can get away with some of those high status jokes because it's coming from an underdog perspective, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But if I do other types of material that aren't in that context, I usually have to make myself the loser of the joke as opposed to the winner.
Yeah. Putting yourself in line with your hedgerow origin story.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Getting the compliment of being like equated to Colin Farrell, but also just being like an absolute muck savage, just like a Cabbage Patch Baby or something, a hairy, big eyebrowed Cabbage Patch Baby.
It's something that we've talked about before on this show. And it's a comparison made with American comics, where audiences in the US, they expect you to be brilliant. They assume you're going to be great.
Yeah.
Whereas audiences in the UK tend to assume that you're probably not going to be, and they wait for you to show that you are.
I think so. Yeah, that is very true. And again, I think that helps you become better because you are being required to prove yourself culturally. Like an audience, culturally, the audience is asking you to prove yourself, which can only make you improve. And it's more like, you've probably heard, Adam Bloom's book, Finding Your Comic Genius, isn't that what it's called?
That's it, yeah.
He has a very good observation about American audiences and UK audiences. Like, they like winners. They like when you're very, like we're just talking about there being the winner of the joke, you win the day. But UK audiences want you to be a bit more self-deprecating and not necessarily the winner.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, for some reason, my natural inclination is to put myself as the winner in a joke, or like myself can be a little bit dark, and I've kind of had to like reevaluate that, where I'm saying something that's a bit messed up or doing something that's a bit messed up in the joke, and that doesn't always land with UK audiences. But if I can flip that, because I like dark humor. And I don't want to change that, but I always have, if I write a joke, I have to find a way to make sure that I'm the one who's the victim of whatever dark thing is happening.
Yeah.
Whether I'm aware of it or not in the context of the joke,
Yeah.
Which is an interesting tightrope to walk. I don't know why it's probably like an insecure thing, like like a subconscious insecure thing, whereas like, well, yeah, I'm embarrassing myself up on stage here, but at least I'm the one who's in control. Even if it's like made up in a joke,
To an English audience, you can win, you can be a winner, but you have to have spent an hour telling us how much you've suffered first. You have to struggle, and then we're with you, because then you're an underdog and we're on your side. Then we'll accept it, because then you're a champion, because you've had that time to suffer and struggle.
Exactly, yeah. You have to whip yourself for an hour before you get to that point. And you might not be allowed it then as well at the end, which is...
Yeah, you have to have suffered enough.
For sure, yeah. Have you suffered enough?
So do you find then, as a storyteller, having that time, having that hour at Fringe to sort of set out your stall and tell those stories and have that room to spread your wings, is where you're happier? Or is it doing the short spots where you get to mingle with other people, make connections for collaboration? Or is it in the writing? Where are you happiest, do you think?
I think I love writing when it goes well. Like, I don't know who said this quote. I'm very bad for attributing who said stuff, but I definitely didn't say this. I love having written. I don't like writing. Now, I butchered that. I paraphrased it, but it's like the enjoyment of writing typically comes afterwards. Because while you're in it, sometimes it can be such a slog, and you're just like, I can't think of anything here. Or you might have an idea, and then once you start writing it out, you're like, where was I going with this? This is dumb. You get really in your head. But then sometimes there are moments of flow. Because I need to write in the morning, so that's when it kind of strikes, the iron strikes hottest. And sometimes you a few hours will go by, and you're like, whoa. And then you look back over all the stuff, and you're like, geez, there's a lot of good stuff here. And then you'll rest on it, and then come back the next day, and you're like, where's all this good stuff gone? You might find one bit in like 4 pages where you're like, okay, maybe that might work if I squeeze it in somewhere. That can be, I find that very, very gratifying. But then in terms of the performance, I think I can get really, really in my head sometimes if I'm going up on a lineup, particularly with comics I admire, to the point of where it's to my own detriment and it kind of hurts the performance.
Right.
I don't even really like people I know coming to see me perform, because that usually tends to be the worst shows. And that's obviously something to do with, there's not some magical rule where it's like, if people come to see you now, it's going to be a bad show. But it must be, what it must be is that like there's something subconscious where like I feel a pressure if someone I know is in the crowd, this has to be good. Or again, there's comics I admire that I'm on a lineup with, and then I'm like, this has to be good. And then inevitably I'm not enjoying it as much, which I think is the most important thing with performance, where you can just enjoy yourself on stage and there's no good or bad.
Yeah.
If you put that pressure on yourself, then it's, it's probably just going to be bad. So then with that, I found myself performance-wise the most free if it's just me and the audience in the room.
Yeah. I
don't feel that pressure, of being scrutinized or imagining I'm being scrutinized. Because again, performers are narcissistic. That's a narcissistic thing to think, oh, geez, these comics I admire are looking at me now thinking that this is going terribly. Whereas they're probably not listening to my set at all. It's just me imagining it. But it is something that I found when I was up in Edinburgh. I'd have people in the room for like 45, 50 minutes. And some of those shows, the shows that went well, were the most enjoyable performance experiences I've ever had, I think. And I felt the most, free or liberated or whatever you want to say. Because it was kind of like, oh, this is just us in the room. This is just for us. Nobody else is here. There's no windows. There's nobody coming in. I can, I felt I could be more myself. Or, do you know what? Because I haven't been doing comedy that long, and obviously I haven't figured myself out. Like, I'm just over 3 years. It was like I could figure out who I was on stage more. I was like exploring it and experiencing it in the moment, and then afterwards making observations of going, oh, that was interesting how I played that joke to make it more palatable and get the response that I hoped I'd get when I wrote it.
Right.
Where I don't really feel like I get those moments of clarity, I suppose, when you're on a lineup with anywhere between, in London, 5 to 1,000 other comics on one night.
You said there about being more yourself. I mean, you've been doing comedy a few years now. Do you find that you are very much yourself when you're on stage, or are you a heightened, a more excited version, or a character even of yourself?
Somewhere in between character and myself. I think my natural disposition isn't as bright and bubbly as I am on stage. I think because I quite here. Listen, I'm a nice person, all right, but I do like my time to myself, and I do find social situations sometimes with particularly new people. I can find it quite stressful because I'm always in my head about going like, right, am I saying the right thing here now, or I'm a comedian because I want people to like me. And then that happens in normal one-to-one conversations where I'm like, I might do a little throwaway joke in a group of new comedians and I might not hit. And then I'm in my head going like, hate me. Oh, they'll run in front of a bus. These thoughts go through your head. So, I mean, how I am normally is like a mix between how I am on stage and then just a bit more reserved and careful and not putting myself out too much until I get properly comfortable with people. But who I am on stage is probably someone more aspirational to how I wished I was, which is very confident, very bubbly, saying things that are a bit messed up, but enjoying it and then wanting other people to enjoy that I said it. Yeah. I augment my accent to a certain extent. On one level, practically, I think particularly people in the UK respond well to Irish accents. It's like I've gotten since I come over here, sometimes people hear an accent like, oh my God, are you Irish? I love your accent. And then, sometimes they'll do it back to you and you're like, oh yeah, that's brilliant. Which is fine. It's flattering in a way. But from that data given to me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to turn my accent up a bit here because I've been told enough that the Irish accent is pleasing audibly, and I also think it lends quite well to comedy. I mean, one of the best examples of it would be, obviously you got Tommy Tiernan. He'll turn his accent up. He's got a real Midlands Mead accent, which is a very funny accent. And then even more currently, Mike Rice's accent, he does talk like that anyway, but he'll turn it up on stage to make it that bit more like whimsical and, you know, I suppose just like innately, or what you think an Irish accent would be as more of a caricature in the most complimentary way. I say that because I love Mike Rice's comedy, and that's something that I try to emulate going on stage as well. So it's like turning up certain parts of myself, to make it funnier, if you get me.
Yeah. And you've mentioned there's some comedians that you enjoy. I mean, how are you as an audience member, given what you've been saying about, you know, having comedians and so many comedians in the audience who've brought people who don't want to be there necessarily? Are you a good audience member? Do you watch it the same way as you once did, or are you now analytical, do you think?
No, geez, I love stand-up comedy. I watch specials all the time. I love I saw up at Fringe, like I took Mondays off up at Fringe, and I probably see anywhere between 4 to 5 shows a day on Monday. And I just want to see as much as possible. Like, who did I see now? I saw Vittorio Angelone's show. It's fantastic. Dan Tiernan's was amazing. I think my favorite was Roger O'Sullivan's. Have you seen that? Do you know Roger O'Sullivan?
Yeah, I know Roger. Yeah, his show Feckin' was award nominated. It was fantastic.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I went on my own, and then my girlfriend came up, and I was like, "You have to see this show." And like, I don't really know Roger that well. I know him enough to say hello, all right. And I say he saw him. This is a week after I'd already seen it. I say he saw him in the audience again, going like, "What is that freak doing back here again in this show?" And I was still laughing at every single point. I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I loved the show so much. His joke writing is like, he's one of those comedians you like see, you can listen to his jokes and you're like, oh my God, I need to go sit down and write some jokes. This is crazy, like his ability. Yeah, I just thought he's fantastic. So I love watching comedy, particularly being live in the audience as opposed to watching it on like Netflix or whatever, because there's something very inspiring about seeing them, where like, you know, you watch them and you're like, it makes me want to get up on stage afterwards. You know, I feel the electricity in the room, watching the structure, watching how like an hour is formed, because that's something that I think you touched on something about what do I like, shorter sets or longer. I think I naturally lean towards longer form stuff, which comes as a detriment when I'm first writing a joke, because I've so much fat on a joke, then I can't see what darlings to kill. But I love seeing someone have like a polished hour, tight jokes, no fat on it, and it's all there. So I love what, you know, I'm the same with like artists. I listen to their album. I won't like just skip through their singles. You know, I like something that's made to be part of a bigger body of work.
Yeah. Do you think that you've learned then so far one single lesson that you kind of carry with you that informs your philosophy moving forward?
The thing that it's such a cliche, but sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason. And it's one of these, sometimes cliches are something that you won't hear it until it drops for you. Like, you'll hear it for ages and it won't mean anything to you at all. But then something will click, and something clicked for me this year. That was, I have a little mantra I repeat to myself before going on stage. Just go, have fun. Just have fun, have fun, have fun, have fun. Go out there, enjoy yourself, have fun. Because I think that's the most important thing. And that's one thing I love. One thing I didn't like about, say, like writing plays or something is like the whys. You have to have a lot of logic and a lot of reasons. Like, well, why is this happening here? Why does this character want to do that? Why? And you have to have all these logical things that you wrap up, which you also have to do in comedy. But I think what's most important in comedy, from what I can see now, is like, you know, someone goes, well, why are you doing that? And you're like, well, I enjoy it. It's fun. Like, I get a lot of time. It's a real backhanded compliment. Because I've been singing since I was like 16 or whatever, like, and you know, I'm able to sing. And then sometimes people come off and people are like, oh my God, like, I love your voice. Like, why wouldn't you just do like normal music? Well, I don't want to. It's like, or people will go like, why do you have the guitar and sing with your jokes? Why wouldn't you just do like regular stand-up? It's like, I don't know, I just really enjoy it. I love it. It's something that I enjoy personally. So yeah, it's like the idea of just having fun is so important, particularly to comedy. Obviously to everything.
Yeah.
But I think it's a real North Star with comedy.
Yeah. When you get that feedback, or like you said, the quote from Chortle and getting reviews and things like that, I mean, are you able to just let anything wash over you, or do you fully embrace it, or do you just ignore it as like background chatter? How do you respond to like reviews and criticism and things like that?
It's so, I mean, I think it kind of helps if you're personally being your own worst critic. When other people say shit, you're like, I said something way worse than that. Like, you've no idea about myself. I don't know. I think you do have to be careful with reviews, though, don't you? It's like if you believe the good, you have to believe the bad, vice versa.
Yeah.
And both are as destructive as the other. In the position I am, you kind of have to, like, if you get a review, then I have to go and see, right, is this something worthwhile using for self-promotion? Because you have to be shameless to cut through the noise. If you get something nice said by someone who's in a position of taste making, then you're like, okay, I have to, like, look at what a good boy I was. Look, Chortle said I was such a good boy. Which they didn't, not really, for the Musical Comedy Awards. I thought that quote was nice. No, it wasn't harsh, like, but it wasn't great either. So it's like taking all that into account, particularly if it's positive, I tend to like go, okay, whatever, that's their opinion. I think there's a benefit to looking at something that's negative and being objective about it and go like, is there any truth to this? And how can I use that constructively to improve something? Because there was stuff said about me in reviews by reviewers that were on the negative side. But then I was able to go, oh no, that's true what was said there. And I do need to work on that. That could be better. So I like to take something that's negative and turn it positive.
Right.
But then if it is just positive, it's like, well, there's nothing to improve on here. This doesn't service me at all.
Yeah. So what do you think so far have been your best and worst moments then in comedy?
I think in terms of like personal achievements, I thought this last Fringe, I was just really, there was like 3 shows in particular that were full. I say like a 20-seater with 22. And it was just nice because the year beforehand, it was, I barely cobbled together 40 minutes. To kind of like stretch out. And most of those, there was lots of lulls in bits that I had that I was just throwing it in to fill out time. And that being said, even in the iteration I did just the year gone, there was like, from my own perspective, a lot of weak points and stuff that like, right, I've been working on this bit or that show for so long, it just doesn't work. I don't have the skill to make it work at the moment. I need to improve that way. But there were moments where I do a whole show and it was just really fun for me, and judging by the response from the audience, they really, really enjoyed themselves. There was no obligation for them to come up to me afterwards and say nice things that they did. So that was probably the best. It was just like seeing from the year beforehand, it was like, oh, there's a jump here, like there's an improvement. Yeah. Thankfully. I think if I didn't see that, I had to dip out. That being said, I think the worst experience I've ever had, again at the Fringe, I was like a year in and I did like 10 days just doing spots. And there was like an Irish compilation show in Dropkick Murphy's, that Irish bar that, thank God, is run by an Irish person, because if it wasn't, it would be a hate crime. The decor in there is... But I was on a line, and there was a guy, Eddie Malarkey's his name. He runs the Crack Den in Dublin, really great club.
I know Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie's great. And he gave me just a 5-minute open spot on a lineup with these like seasoned Irish comics. One of them being, do you know Shane Daniel Byrne?
I know the name, but I haven't seen them perform.
He's fantastic. He's at the Fringe every year. He's probably at the Fringe next year. He's fantastic. Like, he's someone that I'd look up to. And I remember I was kind of chatting to him beforehand. I was introducing myself. I said, I love your stuff, all that. And he's like, great. And then Eddie called me up to do my 5 minutes. And this is when I was still doing the 3 to 4 minute songs, and just like abject silence in front of a full room of 100 people, and I'll never forget just walking back towards the back of the room with the other comics, and then Shane just not making eye contact with me. And I was just like standing at the back going, that, like, just humiliating, like absolutely humiliating. And then, like, even to this day, like, I've even met Shane, like, at the I went to a show and like chatting to him a small bit, and then just like either it's imagined or true, just like behind his eyes, he's like, it's as if he still remembers seeing me perform for the first time, bombing as hard as I did. It's just like, I can't believe it. Like, but yeah, those experiences are, they're far more useful than the good ones, because you learn from it. You're like, right, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah. So how can listeners find out all about you and where they can come and see you performing?
I don't necessarily have, I should probably, like, loads of comedians. I just feel a bit, setting up a gig list on like your Linktree or something at the level I'm at. I'm like, I don't know. I don't need to, I'm not there yet. I'm not as if like, touting my dates or whatever, but I'm around and about. If you're in London, I gig at home in Cork and Dublin from time to time. I'm trying to get out in the UK a bit more, because it's so expensive to travel around here. It's crazy, like. So I'll try to hit up Brighton. I did Manchester a couple of times, so I'll be around. You might come across me. Other than that, if anybody's listening and they are on Instagram or TikTok at Eoghan Collins Comedy, and I foolishly spell Owen the Irish way, so that is OGHAN. It really makes it easy for people to find me, Mark. But yeah, I guess I push my socials the most, particularly the Instagram, because unfortunately the way comedy is going, the way you get gigs and the way you get jobs is having a following online. And then, if you get a big enough following, then you can kind of sell your own tickets, which is, something that I'm aspiring towards at some stage.
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask you my last question then, which is always the same. How, Eoghan, would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Is this like one word?
It could be a word, a paragraph, a story, whatever inspiration takes you.
Terrifying, foolish, and meaningful. Nice little pretentious contradiction of a sentence there.
Eoghan, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been a genuine privilege. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, this is great.